Police are always the good guys. Or are they? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. For 30 years, Institute for Justice wrote, Carlos Pina ran a print shop in North Hollywood. His world was turned upside down, however, in August 2022 when a fugitive forced his way into Carlos's shop and barricaded himself inside. After a prolonged standoff, the city of Los Angeles' SWAT team stormed the shop, launching dozens of grenades that tore through the walls, windows, and ceilings, destroying most of Carlos's expensive printing equipment. In total, the damage from the assault alone exceeded $60,000. And then the police said sorry and paid for the damages, right? No, not so fast. And before I get into all that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for your faith-based podcast, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my 3 times a week newsletter. Comes out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, delivered right to your email box, containing all the commentaries that I write all day long at the Washington Times, as well as my Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcast. But wait, that's not all. You may also get Bold and Blunt at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news platform of Pastor Jack Hibbs out in California. Great site. You got to go visit there. Check out all the podcasts, all the actual video shows that they produce out there from a faith perspective. But guess what? You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are offered. That's right, Spotify, Apple, yada, yada, yada. So police are always the heroes, right? Police are always the good guys. Wouldn't that be great if we could just believe that? And 95, 96, I don't know, the vast majority of police are the good guys. And we need to remember that, because there is a concerted, destructive movement from the left to pretend as if police go into policing business simply to murder young black males, right? I mean, on surface, how ridiculous does that sound, right? If you have murder in your heart, why wouldn't you join the military and go into wartime? Why would you go into policing where the Constitution guides you? Anyhow, it's stupid on surface, but we have to be careful, because the left is pushing for us all in America to believe that police regularly, daily, minute by minute, and with full abandon, just toss aside the Constitution in order to just go after minority groups in America and destroy their lives and put these minorities in jails and imprison them and destroy families and so forth. Police aren't doing that, okay? Yes, there are bad apples, but by and large, police are good. We actually need more police in American society at this time, because we have all the leftists, the Black Lives Matter, Antifa, thuggery types, just rallied by the likes of Maxine Waters and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, telling them to get in the faces of MAGA supporters and go to their homes, go to their places of business, of those who worked and served in the Trump administration, and those who to this day dare to support Donald Trump for president in 2024. Go there and make it clear that they will not be allowed to speak in society. You have so many on the left that are just pushing forth that kind of agenda and exploiting the low information, no information voters out there to believe that police in society are actually inherently racist, inherently anti-black, anti-minority, and their whole reason for joining the force is simply to imprison members of society who aren't white. Well, okay, so there's the disclaimer, right? Get that out of the way. But questioning police powers and holding police accountable for abuse of powers, or maybe for just simply using powers that perhaps they shouldn't rightly have in the first place, that's not anti-police. That's pro-American. Founding fathers wouldn't like some of the things that police are allowed to do today lawfully. And honestly, neither should you or me. The Foundation for Economic Education wrote this piece back in January of 2019 entitled, "I called police for help and they stole my car, my brush with civil asset forfeiture." If you've listened to Bold and Blunt for any length of time, you know that I hate, no, I detest, no, I abhor civil asset forfeiture laws. That basically gives police the right to seize your properties if they suspect you, if they arrest you, if they apprehend you for another crime. So say you are living in a house with your children, and your child, your wayward child, sells drugs out of your home, and you have no knowledge. You have no knowledge of that taking place. So police arresting that child can then even seize your home, even though your child is not listed as co-owner on that house. They can seize your car if they suspect that your child may have used that car during the commission of the drug crime. But let's remember, at that point, it's still alleged drug crimes, right? The kid hasn't gone to court, hasn't been found guilty of committing crimes. The police, based on suspicion, can seize any amounts of cash you may have in that house because they allege that your child may have gained that cash during the commission of drug sales, illegal drug sales. So that's how civil asset forfeiture works. If police suspect you or somebody in your family, your community, who is using your own properties, suspect drug crimes taking place or other so deemed crimes, other specific crimes taking place, police can seize those properties that they believe are or were used during the commission of the crimes. But let's remember, again, these are all suspected crimes. This is during arrest, right? The suspects have not gone to court, have not been vetted through the judicial system yet, have not been deemed guilty of any crimes. And this is my problem with civil asset forfeiture. That police can swoop in and seize all these properties, and in some instances even sell them for split of profits with the federal authorities, the marshals, the federal law enforcement officials, and so forth. They can split the proceeds from the sales of these items. And then you as an innocent American individual are put in the position of having to prove your innocence to get back those properties. That's a flip. That's a flip of what it's supposed to be in this country. You're supposed to be presumed innocent until found guilty in a court of law by a jury of peers. FEE puts it this way: the presumption of innocence. The presumption of innocence is a fundamental principle of our legal system that ensures that the burden of proof is on the one who declares, not on the one who denies. However, FEE continues, this principle has been under threat in recent years by police departments across the United States and the widely practiced policy of civil asset forfeiture. When a property is determined by the police to be involved in a crime, it is seized and held by the police department. Oftentimes, the property is held indefinitely, only to be auctioned or released at a very high cost. Unbelievable. In a country where, first off, your rights come from God, and government, which includes police, are only there to preserve and protect those rights. And second off, in a country with a constitution that expressly prohibits the unlawful seizure of property, right? Read the Constitution. It's a short document. It won't take you long. As a matter of fact, in the exact same amount of time it takes to listen to a Bold and Blunt podcast, you could have read the entire Constitution. That's how short it is. You want to hear some stats on civil asset forfeiture, which is administered under the Department of Justice? Don't answer that. I know you do. Go to the Department of Justice's website, right? And honestly, they don't make it very easy to find this information. You can Google search it and it pops up, but then you have to click on a dozen different links to find find a breakdown of how these monies are collected and spread out, instead of just getting a nice concise summary. But go to Justice Department, its website, fiscal year 2022 asset forfeiture fund reports to Congress, and let's just click on total net deposits to the fund by state of deposit. So the federal Justice Department, U.S. Justice Department, keeps track of how much money states collect under, or state police collect under, civil asset forfeiture laws, and then how much money gets deposited into the Justice Department's coffers for asset forfeiture. Alabama, first one on the list. Fiscal year 2022, total net deposits to the Justice Department Civil Asset Forfeiture Fund, $2.858 million. Okay? $2.858 million. Alaska, the second on the list, $23,000. Not as lucrative for the fund. $8 million from Arizona. $164 million from the District of Columbia. Isn't that odd? Tiny, teeny District of Columbia almost heads the list when it comes to civil asset forfeitures. California, $291 million and some change, right? I'm rounding here. $291 million civil asset forfeiture for last year alone. 0 from Iowa, 0 from Montana. Seems to me that if you're a patriotic American, those are the states you want to be at, right? South Dakota, 0. Wyoming, 0. That's about it for the zeros. Every other state, it seems like, has contributed anywhere from thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars to civil asset forfeiture fund. The total net deposits for the entire fiscal 2022 year to the Justice Department from all the states' collections of civil asset forfeiture, $1,788,302,825. Not bad, right? No wonder civil rights organizations and critics of civil asset forfeiture laws call these forfeiture laws cash cows for police, because they share the proceeds, right? They give some to the feds, they keep some for the localities, they give some to the states, they give some more to the localities. So if you're a cash-strapped local police department, what local police department doesn't claim nowadays that it's cash-strapped, civil asset forfeiture is really a good way to get some money, right? Too bad it just doesn't meet the constitutional smell test. I cannot personally believe that this program exists at all. It seems to me that the easy solution would be that police cannot seize property without having a guilty finding affixed to the suspect who's connected to those properties. Seems to me that that would be the obvious pro-Constitution, pro-America, pro-God-given liberties fix. But there are too many people out there who think, well, police are just trying to do their jobs and do it in a way where they don't get hurt, they don't get harmed, and where they don't leave properties on the street for the other drug dealers to use to commit crimes while they're just arresting one suspect of 1,000 committing the same crime. That may be. Police safety is certainly a concern, but police safety at the risk of constitutional liberties for Americans is something that needs to be questioned. Think of no-knock warrants. Those used to be few and far between, right? Police say they need no-knock warrants because they need the element of surprise when trying to arrest some suspects who are known to be very violent in nature or are known to have stashes of weapons and who are known to not mind using those stashes of weapons against police. So police need to be safe. They need to make it home to their wives and their husbands at night. Police safety is of utmost importance, but no-knock warrants have been used in recent times for things that just don't seem to warrant a no-knock warrant. There have been instances where innocent people have been sleeping at night and suddenly their homes, in their perception, have been broken into. And so what do? They grab their legally owned weapon and fire at police or brandish their weapon at police whom they think are unlawful intruders. They don't know they're police. It's the middle of the night. And the police, because they're defending themselves and they want to make it home safely to their husbands or wives, fire. And the suspect gets killed. And sometimes the suspect is not even the suspect. Sorry, wrong person. Sorry, wrong home. Or in Georgia, sorry, didn't mean to throw that flash grenade in there and kill the baby in the crib. We were just trying to get that drug suspect. You remember that case a few years ago? So police need to be held accountable for not just their own actions, but for the systems that they are allowed to operate under legally. Because sometimes those systems get stretched past rightful constitutional limits. And going back to what I read from the Institute for Justice a few minutes ago, Carlos Pina and his print shop in Los Angeles, and what happened to him, his plight of his business being destroyed by police who were chasing a fugitive. The fugitive ran into Carlos Pina's print shop, threw Pina out, and then police, SWAT team members commenced throwing grenades and destroying the business in the search, in pursuit of that suspect, that fugitive. Going back to that and listening to Carlos Pina's plight of trying to get money to repair his shop, that's another issue that rightfully deserves questioning and rightfully deserves a second look about the systems that we have allowed police in this country to operate under, all in the name of keeping American law-abiding citizens safe. Because sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So my guest today is Jeffrey Redfern. He is an attorney for the Institute for Justice, fighting on behalf of Carlos Pina to get his shop repaired. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being on Bold and Blunt. It is really great to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
So I wanted to read just a few lines from a complaint that your Institute for Justice just filed, and then let you take the story from there. It reads, on August 3rd, 2022, the Los Angeles police were pursuing a fugitive near Mr. Pina's shop. While attempting to evade the police, the fugitive forced his way inside the shop, violently threw Carlos Pina out the door, and barricaded himself inside. The city SWAT team then surrounded Carlos Pina's shop and ordered him to remain outside. What happened next?
Well, there was about a 13-hour standoff. So the SWAT team eventually fired dozens of tear gas canisters into the store through the windows and the wall, and totally saturated the place. When they went in there, they found that the fugitive had escaped. He had probably gotten out sometime before that. But pretty much everything in the shop was destroyed. All of Carlos's inventory, all the drywall had to be torn out, and most importantly, all of his expensive printing equipment. I didn't know this before I started litigating these cases, but tear gas is highly toxic, and it pretty much destroys electronics. So he suffered over $60,000 in damage to his equipment.
Wow. Okay. And just to clarify, he runs a printing shop, or did run a printing shop in L.A., correct?
That's right. He's been in business for over 30 years now, and he had been at that location for about 11.
Okay, so everybody wants to think well of the police, right? Everybody wants to see the police as heroes, always doing the good work of law-abiding citizens. But in cases like this, what happens? Honestly, I've seen some of the police bus on television where homes are utterly destroyed during their searches. And I just assumed that if there's a wrongful search, that police then pay for the repairs. Is that supposed to be how it is, and this fell under the radar, or what's the law on this?
So I think your instinct is what a lot of people think, and it turns out that in practice, the results are inconsistent. We've heard about a lot of jurisdictions, something like this happens, and the city says, yep, no problem, we'll pay for that, send us the receipts, and, we'll make sure you're not overbilling us, but that's on us. There are other places where they say, no, you're out of luck. And until recently, these cases weren't really being litigated that much, so there isn't a ton of case law on the question.
So this happened to Carlos Pina on August 3rd, 2022, so a year ago. So over the span of the last year, has he been able to conduct business at all?
So he's been operating since January at about 20% capacity. He was lucky in that some people from the community saw what had happened, and somebody sold him a secondhand commercial printer on the cheap. So he's been operating out of his garage, but he doesn't have the full suite of equipment that he had before. It's 100 degrees there, so it's pretty uncomfortable working conditions. He's doing a lot of stuff manually, like collating copies and cutting things, and he has to load hats and T-shirts onto these manual hand presses. So it's very slow work, and he's also he's not at a storefront anymore, so he doesn't get the walk-in business that he used to get. And that was actually pretty significant. We were out there a few weeks ago looking through the store with him, and just in the 45 minutes we were there, there must have been 5 or 6 people who came by and said, "Oh, are you open? I'd like to get some T-shirts printed or something." And you could just see his face thinking every time. He said, "No, I'm sorry, we're not. I can do this, I can't do that. Here's my card," because he just knew that he was losing all of this business, and there was nothing he could do about it.
Yeah, so in the complaint, you talk about the loss of $60,000 in terms of repairs, but it must be almost impossible to estimate the amount of money that he's lost due to lost business over the last few months.
Well, his profits were pretty consistent in the period leading up to that, so we think he's got over $80,000 in lost business now, but that number just keeps going higher every week that he is not able to get all of his equipment back.
So, Jeff, what did the SWAT team members say? I assume that there were queries made regarding payment for the repairs.
So they gave him business cards, just said, call these people. And in our experience, a lot of these SWAT teams have no idea that the owners are they're not getting compensated. I had another client who was told, just call this number and they'll take care of you. So they didn't know what was happening on the back end. They're certainly not, in our experience, out to ruin hardworking, innocent business people like Carlos. They're just trying to safely, get a criminal off the streets. So that seems to be the standard practice. Most police officers have a card where they just tell you, here's our risk management person, here's our compensation person, and they'll sort you out. But they don't really know the details.
So you can understand what you just described. The police themselves don't know. The officers who do the actual on-ground work don't know what happens, and they assume that the property owner is compensated adequately. So the breakdown then would be with the SWAT administrative team, yes?
It's typically the city attorney, or it depends on the size of the city how they organize that. But we're seeking compensation from the city itself. Okay,
and the city, do you find them to be sympathetic?
Not particularly in this case. I think everyone understands that law enforcement costs money. We pay our taxes to pay the salaries, their training, their equipment, the real estate for their stations. And it just seems strange that we single out this one cost of law enforcement, and it is a cost, and say, instead of spreading that around society the way we spread all these other costs, we're going to have this perverse lottery where one random individual is stuck holding the bag. To me, that makes about as much sense as saying that we're going to have a lottery to determine who pays the police chief's salary.
Is there anything here that I'm missing? Because, honestly, every once in a while I go on Institute for Justice's website to keep up with what you guys are doing, because I love the work that you guys do. And you always take on the most interesting of cases. And when I read about this, I thought, I've got to be missing something, because it seems to me after a year that, especially in this day and age where police are trying to maintain a good PR with the people, right? The city officials should know that. It just seems to me so outrageously unfair to be an American citizen. Police come in, destroy your business, and the city just shoulder shrugs and says, oh, well.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you there. I don't know what's going on inside the heads of the people who are making these decisions. I suspect there's a lot of bureaucratic inertia where, certain employees say, hey, look, if there's nothing that tells me I have to pay for this, my job is to say no to things where I don't have to. And not enough people are asking the moral question, is this something that we should pay for? Set aside whether you know details about constitutional law. Everyone who hears this pretty much agrees this is not the kind of burden that someone like Carlos should be shouldering by himself.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to me. It's really baffling. I'm having a hard time getting my head around this, that there's any possible argument from the other side to hold up payment. But in your career, in your role as an attorney with Institute for Justice, you must have heard of other similar instances happening around the nation. How many to date do you know of where similar occurrences have taken place?
Specifically, since I started following this issue in 2019, the first time I was litigating one of these cases, I've heard of probably a couple dozen. I think there's a lot more. My suspicion is that the ones that I'm hearing about are typically where it happens in more middle-class neighborhoods where people are more likely to talk to the press and talk to attorneys and make a big stink out of it. I suspect that it's happening more than we realize. But we had a case very similar to this one in Texas just a year ago where we actually won. And the court said that this is a taking under the Fifth Amendment, just like if the government took your house to build a road or a school or something, and ordered the city to compensate our client. So we're hopeful that we can start moving the needle now that we're litigating these cases and keeping an eye out for them. And it's encouraging also, I should say, that I more often than not, probably in a slight majority of the cases that I hear about, the city does agree to voluntarily compensate the property owner, whether they think they're required to or not. They just realize it's the right thing to do. And one would hope that everyone would understand that. But, for those cities that don't, we're going to be there and we're going to litigate.
How could you not win on a case like this? I mean, what possible argument could there be from the other side that would be so compelling to allow the destruction of an innocent man's business by government entities?
Well, there's a line of bad cases, none of them in the Supreme Court. I think the Supreme Court precedent is all pretty clear about these issues, but there are some lower court cases where people brought kind of kitchen sink complaints, and they alleged a lot of torts against the police officers. They said, look, this was an unreasonable search and seizure, you used excessive force, etc. Oh, and it's also a taking under the Fifth Amendment. And I think that confused the courts a bit, because they would say, look, the police acted reasonably, they were doing what was necessary to protect life and property and not to put themselves in unnecessary risk. So therefore, they're not liable for a tort. And then I think it felt strange for the court to turn around and say, but you're still liable for a taking. So some of these courts have gotten a little bit confused. They're allowing this tort fault sort of analysis to infect their takings analysis, if that makes sense.
So it really depends on the attorneys bringing cases in defense of these property owners to make the right argument. And really what you found is the Fifth Amendment is the proper argument to make.
That's what I think so. I mean, we can look at these cases and say maybe the police should have used a little less force, maybe this was excessive, but I'm not an expert in SWAT tactics, and, lives are worth a lot more than property, so I understand why they're doing things like this. I just think that it makes sense when a random individual who didn't do anything to cause this has to sacrifice their property for something that the public is trying to achieve. It makes sense for the public to pay.
What was the fugitive wanted for? Do you know?
We don't know. We tried to find that out. I don't know that they ever caught him. They just said that there were 9 outstanding felony warrants, so he was clearly a high-priority target. He was initially being pursued by U.S. Marshals. They're the ones who cornered him. And then the L.A. SWAT team took over, and they're the ones that eventually assaulted the shop.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I know that some of these no-knock warrants that police have been allowed to execute have been really for alleged crimes and alleged criminals where it's a little bit questionable whether they need to take that level of force in the first place.
Yeah, if you look back at the history of these no-knock warrants, and I'm not a Fourth Amendment expert, but early on the expectation was that these are going to be really rare circumstances.
Right.
And now they've become almost the norm. Anytime you say this person could potentially be dangerous or there could be some contraband that could be flushed, it seems like it's become standard practice anytime someone might have a gun. Even if, it's the United States, a lot of people have guns. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're all dangerous.
Right. And that's why Institute for Justice is such an important organization in my view, because you do the sometimes difficult job of holding police accountable, which sets you at odds with many in America who always want to look at police, along with teachers, as being the good guys. So it's good that you guys are pursuing this case. What's your hope? I know your hope. What's your guess, your best guess, on how this case of Carlos Pina and his printing shop is resolved?
I'm pretty optimistic. I think that the Supreme Court precedent is really good. And that even though there are a lot of cases that went the wrong way in the last 5 or 6 years, I don't think that they were very thoroughly reasoned. And I think the win that we got in Texas is really a watershed moment, because we got a very long, thoughtful opinion from this federal judge where he looked at these other cases and said, look, this is shaky reasoning. They're misreading these cases. They're misquoting them. They're not even looking at the right precedents. And I'm not going to follow them because that's just not good law. I think that having an opinion like that other judges can look to really sort of lays out a path and says, look, this is how you should approach these cases. So we're pretty optimistic.
Good. All right. Well, I will be watching and looking for updates in the outcome of this case. So in the meanwhile, Jeffrey Redfern, Institute for Justice attorney, thank you for fighting on behalf of our constitutional rights. And I really appreciate you coming on Bold and Blunt.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
What an astonishing case in America, right? Outrageous. If you like Bold and Blunt, you can get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. If you are a subscriber, thank you so much. It means a lot. Tune in next time, and meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.